It looks like my hair hasn't dried from yesterday still. Good morning everybody, welcome back to the Morning Bible. From your perspective, it's been a day. From my perspective, I pressed the record button and then pressed it again to start today's video. So we're rolling straight on from yesterday's passage, where we were looking at Jesus starting to be brought to the actual officials, start to be brought to the Roman officials. He goes to Pilate, and the religious leaders, the Jewish religious leaders, tell Pilate, look, this guy's been, he's been misleading our nation, forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is the Christ. Number one, Pilate doesn't care about Jesus misleading the nation. Number two, Jesus does tell people to pay their taxes, so Pilate ignores that one. Third one, they say he's saying that he's the king of the Jews. Pilate goes, are you saying you're the king of the Jews? And Jesus goes, yeah, you said so. And that sort of peaceful answer is enough to kind of comfort Pilate, being like, oh, he doesn't seem to be causing much of an uprising or leading any kind of rebellion. But the people are insistent, they're really urgent, and they say, look, this guy's really causing unrest. And so Pilate, who's in Jerusalem to prevent unrest, says, all right, fine, we'll send him across somewhere else, which is where we're going to get to today. So we are going from verse 6 of chapter 23. It says, when Pilate heard this, so when he'd heard that Jesus is stirring up all the people, he asked whether Jesus was Galilean. And when he learned that Jesus belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. So we've got Herod. You remember him from earlier on in Luke. We've got Herod, who he killed John the Baptist. He had him beheaded. He was very keen to kind of catch Jesus early on and interrogate Jesus. He's a very kind of volatile kind of ruler, where he's done a lot of wrong. He's killed a lot of people, and yeah, he was very keen to kind of catch Jesus and kill Jesus early on. But you'll see here his desire to kill Jesus is kind of worn off. He's kind of found new focus, but we'll see he still does want to meet Jesus. So it says, oh, and Herod was in Jerusalem at the time as well. So it's sort of, well, Pilate happened to be in Jerusalem for the Passover to try and prevent there being any uprising. Herod also happened to be in Jerusalem. And so sending Jesus across to Herod wasn't sending him all the way across the country, it was sending him across the city. And so Pilate says, well, look, I can't find this guy guilty for anything, so we'll see if Herod does. I don't want anything to do with this. And so when Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him and was hoping to see some sign done before him. So Herod's desire for meeting Jesus has kind of changed. He no longer wants to sort of execute Jesus, kill Jesus like he did with John the Baptist. Now his desire is to see some kind of sign. He's treating Jesus almost like a magician. He wants to see kind of what tricks Jesus can do, what kind of things Jesus has to say. And so he questioned Jesus at some length, but Jesus made no answer. So the fact that Jesus makes no answer, that fulfills a small kind of prophecy back in Isaiah. We won't go all the way back into that because it's just a small thing. But the fact that sort of Jesus is questioned by the authorities, by Herod, but doesn't make any answer, that's sort of prophesied in scripture. So from verse 10, the chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated Jesus with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. And so Jesus is in Herod's sort of presence. Herod brings all his soldiers in, all his people, and they're kind of questioning Jesus. Jesus isn't giving any answers. So they just get frustrated and they start making fun of him. They start mocking him. And they kind of treat him really badly. They've got all the chief priests and everyone from the temple who have sort of followed them in, and they're telling Herod, like, try and get something out of him, or, try and please put him to death, like that kind of thing. And Herod can't really get anything out of him worthy of killing him. And so Herod just decides to mock him instead. It says, Herod with his soldiers treated Jesus with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him with splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And so Herod dresses Jesus up. So the claim is that Jesus is king of the Jews. That's the way the Romans understand it. Before, it's sort of Jesus has been claiming to be the Son of God, being the Christ, all the rest of it, but none of that language makes sense to Roman ears. And so what they call Jesus instead is King of the Jews, because that's something that kind of makes sense to them. But in the Roman Empire, the Jewish people were so downtrodden that it was like having a really kind of poor title in the end of the day. It was kind of like a mock title, because they regarded the Jews as being so lowly that it's almost like, saying like King of the Rats. Like, it's that they'd have that perspective of Jewish people that they would put them that low. And so the title King of the Jews is kind of making fun of Jesus, and so they dress Jesus up like a king. Herod gives him some sort of splendid clothing to make Jesus look like a king, to kind of make fun of him even more. But they send him back to Pilate. They can't find anything wrong with him. And so that means that Herod and Pilate actually become good friends that very day, for before this they'd been at enmity with each other. So Herod and Pilate hadn't actually liked each other, they'd had a lot of issues. There are notes in my Bible that sort of talk about why, but I don't think it's all that relevant. Essentially they hadn't liked each other, but by sort of accusing Jesus, by interrogating him, by sort of batting him back and forth, they actually come to an agreement. And their agreement is kind of, Jesus isn't guilty. They don't mind mocking him, they don't mind beating him, they don't mind all the rest of it. They'll happily do that because they have that level of corruption built in. But their corruption doesn't spread so far as to say like, oh, we'll put this man to death for nothing. Because at the end of the day, they can't find anything wrong with this Jesus guy. They just think he's a bit of a weird character. And so Herod sends him back. And so he's now back in Pilate's hands. So Pilate, having tried to push Jesus away, saying, I can't find him guilty, now has to deal with Jesus again. And so Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any charges against you. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. So Pilate brings all these religious leaders together, but then he also brings the people together. He kind of calls in everyone who wants to hear this verdict, because a lot of people would have been very interested in this case. And he says, You brought me a man who was misleading the people. So you brought me this guy claiming he was misleading the people, who was leading them away from Caesar, away from paying their taxes, King of the Jews, all the rest of it. But after examining him before you, so Pilate examined Jesus before the religious leaders. They were there for this interrogation. It wasn't like Pilate did this in a back room. He did it publicly. He was like, look, you were there, you witnessed how I interrogated Jesus. And you witnessed that none of the charges stuck, that he isn't guilty of any of this stuff. And even Herod agreed, and Herod and Pilate didn't normally agree, so that's quite a big stamp. He's saying, therefore, I will punish and release him. So Pilate's kind of decision at the end of it is like, well, look, I can't find him guilty of anything, and so I'm just gonna drop the charges. I'm just gonna punish him and release him. So Jesus will get maybe a beating and then sent away. The beating is just kind of, it won't kill him. It's just there to kind of show that he's done something to get the people off his back. But the people aren't very happy with that. But that's something that we'll get to tomorrow. For now, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Yeah, I will see you all later. Much love. Bye bye bye.